what's really important is that we want to make sure that this is freely discussed openly because of our role and our position in the community.
Yes.
But one thing that we really wanted to touch upon was getting back to the audio recordings, the FBI wiretap recordings between you and then Governor Blagojevich nearly 10 years ago. And with that release, we just kind of wanted to talk about it a little bit and then kind of move and shift into other areas that we feel is a major concern right now in the African American community. So, since that discussion that took place, what has changed about you?
Well, maybe if I could just step back and talk about that conversation just for a moment. You know, I have been a longtime friend with Secretary of State Jesse White, and I've known him for 35 years, probably a little longer than that. And so I intended to suggest that he would make an excellent senator, United States senator. We've sent some amazing people to Washington from Illinois over the years, including our current senators, but I'd also include in that Barack Obama and of course Paul Simon and Everett Dirksen and others over many years. And so just the idea that someone of his caliber could serve, that was really the intention of that call. There were parts of that call where I should have pushed back on things that Governor Blagojevich said, and there were parts of that call where I said things that I regret saying, and I really feel like I wasn't my best self that day, and that on that call I know who I am and what my values are, and I've tried during my life to live up to those values, and I know that I didn't meet the standard for myself on that day. I do think it was one day and one call. I've tried to demonstrate over a lifetime that I'm doing things that are right and good, and particularly in the African American community, I've really felt like I've put some real effort and dedication and resources into standing up for families in the African American community and doing things that I thought were making a difference. Funding the Lawndale Christian Health Center, the substance abuse program there, and so that people can get treatment, and health clinics, and and of course the Center on Wrongful Convictions, which I endowed at Northwestern, and the Child and Family Justice Center, which I endowed, all of which focus to a large degree, if not solely, on the getting justice, whether it's economic justice, social justice in the African American community. So I certainly have tried to learn every day of my life when I make mistakes, and I've tried to be better and do better. I know I have been better and done better over the years, and I regret and apologize that there were things that I said on that call, and that's not who I am, and that's not how I demonstrate my values best, and how I have over the years. And I'm proud of a lot of what I've done, but not proud of that day.
Was that the only discussion that you had with Governor Blagojevich in regards to the Senate seat? Because it sounded like a very familiar conversation in terms of the relationship that you and him shared at the time.
Well, remember, I knew the governor mostly for the same reason that I knew lots of other governors and legislators around the country, and that's because I've been very involved for many, many years, more than 20 years, in early childhood education, and that's something that's really a state level mostly, although I also have worked on the federal level on that. And so that was much of the reason why I knew the governor and others in elected office. And so that was, just another, it was a conversation that because, we knew each other, we had the conversation.
I did listen to the morning show this morning when you phoned in to WVON. And one thing that was mentioned a great deal was, what will you do in moving forward to identify a plan that will be the most beneficial for the African American community? It wasn't said quite like that,
no.
But in the long run, we're looking at what are you going to do? Because it was certain things discussed on that tape that kind of backlash, including mentioning or referring to a longtime Senate leader at the time, Emil Jones Jr., as crass. Yeah. So is there a reason why that word was used?
All I can say is I called the Senate president over the last day or two to apologize, and and I certainly didn't mean anything. When I think about it, what I meant to be doing was to advocate for somebody, which was Secretary Jesse White, and it was the governor who raised other names, and I was just trying to refocus, I guess, on the person that I was advocating for, and I didn't do it in the right way, and again, that's a part of the conversation I certainly regret. I just, I think when you ask me what is it that we need to do, because I think that that's important. We were talking on that on the radio program this morning about this. I've been pretty clear about, from the very beginning of the campaign, about plans for lifting up the black community, making sure that I'm focusing resources, economic development resources, small business development resources, real money from the state, making sure that the state is acting properly and according to the law and better than the law about procurement dollars that the state spends, African-American contractors, and then making sure that in government, that in the places where government is putting resources forward, that we appoint people from the African-American community where historically there really haven't been, so that there's a focus on making sure resources come into the community. Because I'm a big believer that the more we can do that, the more we can focus on building capital and ownership of business in the African-American community, the more we're going to keep the resources in the African-American community. The profits stay in the community, the jobs stay in the community. And when those businesses grow, they grow nearby. They don't grow to, it's not like the profits go somewhere else, or the next location of the business is in another state. It's usually in the next neighborhood over. And that, to me, when I think about how we build up the community and jobs, that's a big part of it. There's a lot of other things we need to do. Human services in the community, which have been decimated, frankly, under Governor Rauner, and making sure those resources are put forward. But talking about what I want to do, I've put real plans forward. People can find those on my website. And very early on, I think in the first month of my campaign, my very first plan that I put forward was about building up small businesses, particularly in the African-American community, but I put out lots of plans since.
Do you have thoughts on how these recordings are actually being used? Do you have an opinion on how they're being used?
Yeah, I do. I think that there is someone or some organization that is supportive of Governor Rauner, that is using the Chicago Tribune and using these illegally leaked tapes to damage my campaign, because I know that Governor Rauner views me as his toughest competitor in the general election. And so he's, that's where these are coming from. I don't know who, but I have called for the release of all the tapes, because I think it's clear, hundreds of people spoke with the governor at the time, and yet there's only one person whose conversations are being leaked. And so I think that's unfair, and and they're also editing them selectively to put them out and make them damaging as they could be. So that's what I think about it.
When you are listening to the discussion, what's happening in the community is that people are saying, well, we know this kind of thing takes place. We know these are the types of discussions that take place. But it's something else hearing it actually from these individuals who are running for offices or being considered for offices. Is this the standard discussion that takes place among people who are in authority and people who are in political power when they are talking about groups of people or demographics? I mean, is this not a big deal Or, you know, are you seeing, do you feel like people are overreacting to this? Is this just something that happens when they're talking about positions and who might be good for this post or who might be good for that post?
Well, I think the context of it was that there was mention of the idea of replacing President Obama with, then Senator Obama, with somebody in the African American community. That was the context for even the conversation, because there were certainly lots and lots of people that could have been considered, you know. But that was the context for this conversation that you're referring to. And again, I happen to know Secretary White, and I think not only do I think highly of him, but I think he's just generally revered. I think he's one of the great public servants in our state, and so I was, you know, that was the context for it, was trying to suggest